Welcome to Talk to Brazil with Tom Rioch, the business connector to business in Brazil. Talk to Brazil, leading business podcast, talks with business experts throughout the world. I'm Tom Rioch, connecting people from my studio in Brazil. Joining us again today is Renata Thiebaut. She's operating officer of Green Proposition, assists governments and brands to develop a strategy for e-commerce, digital transformation, and more recently, AI policy and ethics. So Renata, our first interview was in 2020. We talked about opportunities in Brazil and China. Green Proposition now has a footprint in United Arab Emirates, China, India, and Canada, and clients across the globe. So what's next?
Hi, Tom. Thank you very much for the invitation. Yes, it's been a while. Back 4 years ago, we are in the pandemic period, right? So there was so much for us to explore in terms of opportunities for global brands to explore different markets and also to start selling through e-commerce. So much has changed since then. Mm-hmm. Right. So now the companies already started selling online. They already started exporting also to different countries and different markets digitally. Now they need to take a next step. So that's why today we are going to talk about digital transformation.
Well, there we go. And it's always in transformation. Transformation is not static, right? It's dynamic.
Exactly. It's dynamic, yes. And should be continuous also. Companies should not just, continue operating business the traditional way. They need to evolve and seek new ways of doing business globally.
Now, in the transformation, I was saying it is dynamic. It's literally 24/7. Competition's doing something somewhere all the time.
Yes, but not only because of competitors, it's also about technology. Last year, we saw a big boom with ChatGPT, right? So companies, they started launching the equivalent of ChatGPT, generative AI, deep fake. There's so much going on in terms of technologies that companies, they need to keep up with this disruption. They need to be aware of what is going on and how to embrace technology to grow their business.
Well, and to that point, it seems, sometimes it seems like we're in the old Far West, where everybody, the artificial intelligence sort of brought technology, something to the table where I would say most people aren't aware of the power of really what's happening.
And they are not aware of how to use technology to grow the business. I think this is the main challenge. The knowledge process, I think, is very crucial, especially for CEOs, for startup owners, to know how they can capitalize, to know what type of technologies they should focus on.
When we talk about the knowledge process and AI, we think a lot of computer and machine learning, things learning by themselves, systems learning by themselves. There's a risk to all that, isn't there?
Yes, and that's why we've been focusing in these past 2 years on AI ethics, because I do believe that climate change is one of the biggest threats of society, okay, but not the only one. Artificial intelligence also. So companies, especially countries, they needed to understand the cons and the pros of artificial intelligence, of different emerging technologies, but also to mitigate risks. Things cannot get out of control. Imagine if we talk about data protection, cybersecurity, there's so many implications out there that now we need to start talking about it and taking things seriously.
Well, I agree with you, because I think the part of mitigating risks. I feel that many companies are at risk today, and they're not aware of that. as the use of the technology, the chats, what have you, has been placed in the hands of everybody. So we have persons in a company accessing databases,
Yes.
working with information, maybe sharing client information, maybe sharing strategic information. They're not aware that they're actually doing that.
They are not. And if we talk about the largest corporations, let's say Meta, Google, or Microsoft, they have been fined also because they're not able to justify the data collection process, or sometimes the breach of data if there are any cybersecurity risks. For example, they leak our data and nothing has been done about that. But what about the smaller companies? What about the startups? They also needed to take accountability, but the problem is that they do not have enough resources, they do not have knowledge nor infrastructure to tackle this problem. So that's why I think we needed to join hands to tackle this together with the governments before it's too late.
Why I see that, recently the United Nations has adopted a resolution, from my understanding, trying to begin, I don't want to say regulation, but create a format for understanding.
A framework, exactly. So I've been involved with the United Nations and some other international organizations to discuss this topic. I've been covering a lot regarding AI governance, especially in emerging markets, because it's very easy when you are in Europe or North America, right, to discuss about these topics and to put in place different policies that will leverage from technology disruption to translate that into economic growth. But the picture is very different when it comes to Africa, for example, at least the developing countries. So I've been very much involved and active in the international community with the UNESCO, United Nations, writing reports, and also attending and speaking in events led by mostly the UN. So it's very important also to bring the protagonism, let's say, of developing countries to the global arena from their perspective, because the reality of the economy and what technology can do to the society is very different than from countries from, let's say, Europe or North America.
No, but what we see, and specifically talking about startups, there's no more frontier. A startup doesn't necessarily start up in a geographic, it may, but they're starting up, they're sort of planetary at the start. How can they get their hands around what they should be looking at for an AI policy or ethics?
All companies should develop their own AI policies. So we've been working with several companies to help first to draft internal policies, also policies so they can work with their vendors, because it's not only about them. We are talking about global business. Sometimes they have vendors, sometimes they work with factories or with labs, for example. Also in training and capacitation, because people involved in building the systems, also in the data collection process, they need to understand the basics of ethics. Anything regarding fairness, anti-discrimination, transparency, accountability, and also cybersecurity risks, they need to be aware of these 3 pillars or 4 pillars in terms of ethics in all of the process, from the data gathering to the implementation of their services or their products.
Well, hearing you, it reminds me of many, many years ago of the quality process.
Yes.
And at that time, and it was more, focused initially on industrial type companies of creating standards along quality. And that was the same thing, of sharing that with your vendors, sharing that with the community, adopting policies, ethics within that of really what quality was and is. And then implanting that in companies, which was no small feat. Is that where we are today with AI policy?
I think things are moving a bit too slow, but as soon as there will be regulations, companies will need to comply. We are talking about several countries that already have policies, or they are aiming to implement regulations regarding AI and ethics. And I think the biggest example is the EU AI Act that companies, depending on the risk level of their AI systems, they will need to comply with regulations, otherwise they will be penalized.
Well, needing to comply, I can understand that. But the other side is, how do we show that? Will we get to the point of certification, of having a stamp on whatever we do, saying that we are certified to do what we're doing?
There are certifications out there, ISO, IEEE, for example. I am an assessor of IEEE, but I do not think this is the main challenge right now. It's not only about having a certificate and say, okay, I am done. No, it's about changing the mindset, because this is a rather subjective topic when we talk about, let's say, the culture, right? So you need to make sure that your staff, that people that are involved into building these systems, they do understand anti-racism and all of these, basic understanding of ethics and anti-discrimination when they are building the processes and gathering the data. So it's much more than just having a certificate. It's more about exchanging the culture of the enterprise, and also we start being conscious about the risks of technology. It's just like companies, they started taking more care about the environment, right? Implementing more sustainable ways of doing business. It's the same concept, but in this case, it's regarding technology and AI more specifically.
Well, to that first step, the green proposition, the proposition is to help corporations, companies, persons create that mindset. So that is the consulting that you do?
Exactly. Through three different services. The first one is to help with this mindset implication by providing training and capacitation to staff. The second service is to help the companies to develop their internal policies and also guidelines to work with vendors and other third-party providers they might have. And the last one is to do a full consultancy regarding compliance with new regulations, how they can better prepare for when the regulations are in place. I do think that companies should not wait and just take an action when the regulations are there, and they will be confused. They want to know how to do exactly. So they needed to prepare at least 1 year in advance before all the regulations are in place, and they needed to act as soon as possible.
Well, I can agree with you, but do you see that actually happening? How many corporations are putting that as a focal point now, 2024?
Right now, the big ones, they are taking this topic very seriously. Microsoft has released recently a guideline, also a document regarding AI and ethics. IBM has pioneered in that also. Google is going to launch theirs maybe in a couple of months, in 2 to 3 months. So all of the companies, they now have this, let's say, also pressure from stakeholders on acting towards, implementing at least internal policies regarding AI ethics. So especially if you are IPO, right? You do have the pressure to implement policies and different activities regarding sustainability. The same will happen with AI and ethics.
Well, you mentioned IPO. Now, do we see that being incorporated into the checklists that investors have when they're taking a look at a company or investing?
Definitely, more and more.
So we're equating that to where we were several years ago in the environment.
It's still not at the same path, but it is moving towards that.
Well, at least it's starting to be on a checklist because really money talks. So as soon as it gets
True.
and not only startups, but companies wanting or looking needing investment. So that will need to be highlighted as they go forward.
And it is also part of the reputation building of a company. If you're serious about the society as a whole, on how you are taking care of your clients also, because if they sell the services to citizens of regardless of any country, they needed to make sure that they comply with the basics, that they protect the data, that they are being fair, that there is transparency. All of these, the pillars of the ethics they are taking, they've been taken into consideration by these companies.
What do you see, say today? Is this movement stronger in Europe? Is it stronger in the States?
Right now, more in Europe. I think Europe is really doing a good job, and in terms of regulations, in terms of making companies to understand the threats of artificial intelligence. Then United States, also Canada, they already have some sort of legislation, regulations, and policies regarding AI and ethics, though you cannot compare with the EU AI Act. Other countries like Australia or New Zealand, they also have something. And soon Brazil, hopefully, and other African nations will also have something. So more and more countries, they are putting in place different either policies or legislation in place regarding artificial intelligence. However, some of them still do not know how to tackle this and how to capitalize from especially artificial intelligence to create more job opportunities, increase, economic growth while mitigating eventual threats and risks.
Well, that's where I see something like the UN resolution, even though it may not be front stage and in the forefront of the news. It is good to see that the backstage is creating the basis and guidelines that even different cultures can adapt to it.
That's true. It's just a framework that the United Nations has worked on that, pretty much based on the recommendations from the United States. Also, OECD has the AI branch now that they are focusing on developing new policies and also helping countries to develop their policies also. So there are many things going on. It's just to make sure that these frameworks, they can be adapted to the reality of each and every country. You cannot just consider that as one size fits all policy. And this is just the beginning, because after that, you need to have regulations, just like what you have for data protection, you have for cybersecurity, then you need the same regarding AI, because technologies change, right? So perhaps the existing regulations that you have for cybersecurity or for data protection might need to be updated also for new technologies. So
like you said, for the startup, the beginning is the start. So for our listeners, for our audience, how can they start? How can they find you to find more information about this?
I believe the very first step is to seek our help to develop internal policies because the companies and stakeholders, or perhaps the partners, they really needed to understand that the company is taking action to create a new mission or values to the company, that they are serious about that. And the second step should be training and capacitation. I think like you mentioned before, the mindset it plays a crucial part into that. People needed to start understanding the implications and changing a little bit in terms of being less biased or adopting less anti-discrimination, mindset into their work as well.
Well, and to that point, to find someone like you and Green Proposition that can help in the process.
Yeah, I would be glad to help more companies across the globe. We are not only, Dubai-based company. We are a global company. We have our headquarters in UAE, also companies set up in China, operations in India. So we work with clients from across the globe. We would be very much thankful to help also not only companies, startups, but also governments to improve their policies, the regulations, and pass on our knowledge regarding this topic.
Business associations as well, to get their business members around a concept.
Exactly. And I do adopt the mindset that the more is better, right? Because if you are talking about SMEs or small companies that do not have the right infrastructure, we are also there to help them. So it's good to disseminate the word, to spread the word in terms of AI ethics. And I think associations would play a very important role also into this dissemination process.
Very good. Well, Renata, I want to thank you again for being part of our program.
It's my pleasure. Have a nice day.
And for our listeners, you can find more about Renata Thiebaut. It's Renata, the last name Thiebaut. Find her on LinkedIn and greenproposition.com. Greenproposition.com. Talk to Brazil is brought to us by Focus MI Market Intelligence. Focus MI specializes in market research in the Brazilian agricultural market. More about them on their site, focusmi.com. Remember, when you talk to Tom, you talk to the world. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to Tom Rioch on Talk to Brazil, the business connector to Brazil.